On March 15, 2023, in Nashville, Tennessee, an unnoticed algorithmic bias within the demand forecasting system of a major logistics consortium known as LogiChain began the unraveling of an intricate supply chain network. LogiChain had developed an advanced artificial intelligence platform designed to optimize inventory distribution across multiple client companies in retail and manufacturing sectors. This platform employed machine learning models that analyzed vast amounts of historical sales data, consumer behavior trends, and seasonal demand variations. The flaw surfaced when an internal review identified a minor inconsistency in the dataset feeding the forecasting algorithms. This inconsistency originated from a data entry error that was not caught due to inadequate logging mechanisms. The error inflated demand predictions for certain consumer goods while underestimating requirements for others. Specifically, this discrepancy involved the categorization of non-perishable items, which affected the allocation metrics used by the system. As these algorithms lacked sufficient diversity in their training data, they failed to adjust for the skew introduced by this one-off error. On March 16th, the repercussions of this technical misconfiguration manifested quickly. The first measurable impact was seen across several retail partners, predominantly in the Nashville area. Automated inventory distribution systems, influenced by the flawed forecasts, prompted overshipping of items such as luxury home goods, while critically under-delivering essential supplies like bottled water and medical supplies. Within 24 hours, reports from local stores indicated disruptions, with some locations experiencing a 60% reduction in essential item availability. Sales data reflected a stark contrast. Items designated as luxury were overstocked by approximately $2 million worth, whereas critical supplies showed shortages equating to a loss of around $500,000 in potential sales. Inside LogiChain, the early reaction was one of confusion and urgency, as internal communications revealed growing concern over the discrepancies reported by partners. Incident channels buzzed with messages questioning the validity of the demand forecasts. Staff initiated an internal audit, but initial assessments centered around operational inefficiencies rather than the underlying algorithmic biases. Assumptions circulated that the discrepancies were due to external factors, such as unexpected consumer demand spikes or logistics disruptions unrelated to their systems. A few team members hastily proposed temporary manual overrides on shipments to mitigate the shortages, while others raised doubts about the integrity of the AI's decision-making capabilities. Simultaneously, external signals began to emerge. Outlets such as local news stations started to receive reports from consumers experiencing empty shelves in supermarkets, with social media platforms buzzing with complaints. Monitoring alerts within LogiChain's own systems recorded unusual spikes in inventory mismatches and delivery delays. Nevertheless, the media response remained minimal initially, with only minor coverage highlighting consumer dissatisfaction. As March progressed, the situation deteriorated further. LogiChain's attempts to resolve the issues through partial fixes hinted at deeper systemic flaws within the infrastructure. Algorithms recalibrated based on the latest data were still hampered by their structural dependencies on incorrect foundational data. The executives at LogiChain began scrambling to reevaluate their AI models, while simultaneously dealing with increasing pressure from both partners and affected consumers. Miscommunication during these meetings spread confusion rather than clarity. Some teams started working on revised forecasting models, believing that a quick patch would suffice. Others continued to push for a complete overhaul of the algorithmic infrastructure they had relied upon for years. By March the 22nd, the consequences of the bias became alarming, as the undersupply of vital consumer goods triggered a wider crisis. Clients from healthcare providers to grocery chains echoed similar frustrations, reporting increasing service disruptions. The flow of goods ground to a halt in various areas, sparking panic among customers, as the news cycle began to amplify these stories. Tensions escalated within Logi Chain as they prepared for an internal review. Social media buzz was transitioning from complaints to calls for accountability, and discussions of a potential investigation into the operational integrity of their systems circulated among affected companies. As the failures became more pronounced, the logistics consortium faced mounting scrutiny. The delicate balance of the interconnected networks of suppliers began fraying, creating a domino effect across the nation. Logistics teams scrambled to reroute supplies based on the latest parameters offered by the AI, only to find that the models continued yielding flawed outputs. Each erroneous decision compounded the initial bias, trapping companies in a cycle of escalating shortages and excesses. The pressures built as the incomplete fixes failed to address the core issues. Logi Chain leaders were caught in a dilemma, facing calls from partners and consumers for immediate action, while knowing that their automated systems remained at the heart of the problem. As March transitioned into April, the once celebrated logistics optimization system was now seen as a liability. Investigations by both the consortium and external regulators loomed on the horizon, setting the stage for a deeper exploration of algorithmic reliance in a gilded age of automation. Each passing day raised more questions about the robustness of their digital infrastructures, and the crisis continued to unfurl, revealing the systemic vulnerabilities entwined within their operational frameworks. On April 5th, as reports of product shortages reached a crescendo, external pressure mounted with consumers openly expressing dissatisfaction through social media platforms. Journalists began investigating the situation more rigorously, uncovering internal documents that indicated prior warnings had been ignored. They discovered emails where data scientists had previously raised alarms about possible flaws in the algorithm. As stories circulated, pressure grew for immediate accountability, prompting major retailers and suppliers to reassess their partnerships with Logi Chain. Simultaneously, third-party dependencies started to expose vulnerabilities within other systems reliant on Logi Chain's algorithms. Retail giants alleged that the halted supplies had led to millions in losses, drawing the attention of regulators and law enforcement. An initial federal inquiry was launched by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, to assess the claims of negligence and potential consumer deception. The inquiry aimed to determine whether Logi Chain had falsely represented the reliability of its AI systems to clients and the public. On April 15th, following increasing delays and the damning media coverage, Logi Chain's executive board initiated their incident response plan. They commissioned an independent audit of their algorithms, while also working to develop interim manual processes to temporarily circumvent their faulty systems. However, the quick fixes did little to alleviate the broader ramifications. Supply shortages persisted, and the public's trust eroded further. By late April, various agencies began issuing subpoenas to Logi Chain and its executives, demanding records of communications and operational documentation to support the investigation. The company faced increased scrutiny, entailing legal costs that further strained their resources. With mounting creditors and public backlash, Chain's financial position deteriorated sharply. As uncertainties gripped stakeholders, the stock value plummeted more than 60%. In the ensuing discussions, internal investigations from Chain unveiled that a number of employees had previously voiced their concerns over the algorithmic frameworks. These revelations, however, were met with pushback from other firm executives who clung to the narrative that external factors were to blame, diluting accountability. This divide not only risked productive responses, but also contributed to an atmosphere characterized by fear and uncertainty among employees. By May 10th, large-scale protests emerged from affected consumers across various cities. Reports of financial losses from partners reached tens of millions in losses, prompting several retailers to consider legal action against Chain for failed contract obligations. Meanwhile, institutional audits began to paint a grim picture of the discrepancies rooted in the algorithms, bolstered by documentation that supported claims of operational negligence. On June 1st, Chain announced drastic emergency changes to overhaul its data infrastructure, but it was perceived as too little, too late. Clients pulled contracts, and retaliatory strategies enhanced by lawsuits became daily occurrences. Operational capacity turned towards fulfilling their legal obligations rather than actually resolving supply issues. By the middle of June, the confluence of internal mismanagement and external pressure culminated in a crippled supply chain system, dismantling years of business. Decisions made under duress led to a collapse in credibility, ultimately attracting the attention of federal law enforcement agencies actively pursuing fraud charges against senior executives. On July 12th, Chain filed for bankruptcy protection, effectively paralyzing their operational capabilities and freezing assets. The ripple effects throughout the logistics and retail industries were profound, with several suppliers ceasing operations entirely. Investigations continued as public interest surged, and media outlets scoured through records and interviews to further dissect how an algorithmic flaw escalated into a national crisis. Results of the inquiry released in early August confirmed that the algorithmic biases had indeed been identified prior to the crisis, but were inadequately addressed due to a combination of miscommunication and ignored warnings. Journalists uncovered internal chat logs revealing a culture that prioritized profit margins over necessary algorithm audits. As a consequence, multiple executives faced lawsuits for failing to act on information that could have prevented the crisis, resulting in arrests by late August. By September, numerous companies began enacting policies ensuring algorithm audits as a standard operating protocol for the future. Legal ramifications were clear, leading to permanent modifications in business partnerships, with agencies seeking to enforce stricter regulations over AI-driven decisions in logistics. Finally, by the end of September 2023, Chain ceased to exist as a competitive entity within the logistics market, with their technology rendered obsolete and their brand permanently damaged. The crisis served as a landmark case within the digital supply chain management field. The once revered algorithm was dismantled, marking a profound reckoning in industries reliant on automation. As of September 30th, 2023, Chain was declared officially defunct, and the ongoing investigations into the algorithmic biases and managerial negligence highlighted the vulnerabilities of relying solely on automated decision-making within integrated supply systems, signaling a pivotal shift towards accountability and enhanced scrutiny in algorithmic governance.